Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. Trial for murder out of Ohio. We bring you up to speed on trial of accused arsonist Stanley Ford, now stretching into day 8 in court.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're also not going to convince people that R. Kelly was a saint.
As the federal trial against R. Kelly heats up, Law&Crime Daily sits down with the singer's former New York attorney who tells us why he thinks the trial is right on track.
We're talking about murder here.
And the California trial of real estate heir Robert Durst continues. As the prosecution alleges Durst killed his best friend, the defense pushes back in their closing arguments. But first, a bombshell out of the Pike County massacre, as Matriarch Angelea Wagner pleads guilty in her first court appearance of 2021. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to the Season 2 premiere of Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. A grandmother admits to her role in the execution-style murders of 8 members of another family in the Pike County, Ohio. In April 2016, 8 members of the Roden and Gilly families were shot to death, many as they slept with their children by their sides. More than 2 years later, 4 members of the Wagner family were indicted for the murders. Earlier this year, Jake Wagner pled guilty and said he and his family committed the murders so he could have sole custody of the daughter he shared with one of the victims, Hannah Roden. Law&Crime's Angelea Wagner has covered the case since day 1 and is here with somewhat of a surprising development. Anjanette?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise, Brian. You know, this case rocked the community in Southern Ohio when it happened. You had one family accused of killing members of another family, many as they slept. Now we have 2 Wagner family members admitting guilt.
Officers wearing body armor guarded Angelea Wagner as she walked into a Pike County courtroom to admit after years of denials that she helped plan the murders of Hannah Roden and her family.
I plead guilty.
Charges of aggravated murder were dropped against Angelea Wagner. She pleaded guilty to a long list of other counts, including conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, and tampering with evidence. Prosecutors say she didn't pull the trigger, but knew exactly what was going to happen the night of the murders and helped plan them.
Angelea admitted to purchasing some items leading up to the offenses that were meant to help the other 3 co-defendants in carrying out the crimes, such as a phone jammer, which prevents people from being able to call for help, and the shoes that her 2 sons wore during the homicides, specifically of the size and style that they would not typically wear, and also to finding and printing off and forging custody documents.
Angelea Wagner and her son Jake have confirmed the prosecution's theory that the motive for the murders was custody of a daughter that Jake Wagner shared with Hannah Roden. That child was with Angelea Wagner the night of the murders. Hannah Roden was shot with her newborn baby girl laying next to her. Other children were with their parents when they were shot.
Some were specific targets of the Wagners. Some, sadly, were killed simply because they happened to be there.
Angelea Wagner has agreed to tell all during the trials of her son George and husband Billy. In exchange, she'll serve a minimum of 30 years in prison. She had nothing to say as she left the courthouse under heavy guard. Angelea, do you have anything to say?
Now, there's been a lot of chatter on social media, people questioning why in the world Angelea Wagner would be given a 30-year sentence. We tried to get some information about that from the prosecution. They aren't commenting because of a gag order, but the prosecution did say in court that she provided information about other crimes that the Wagner family had committed. There weren't details about what those crimes were, so we're just going to have to wait and see as time goes on what comes out. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and Terry Austin. Gene, first it was Jake Wagner in April, now it's Angelea. Should we expect more of the Wagner family to start taking pleas as the evidence and family witnesses grow against them?
Absolutely, and the saddest thing is the person who waits until the end to plead guilty. This is like a snowball, starts rolling down the hill. You had Jake, now the mother, Angelea, and she's cooperating. And to have the spouse and the mother of 2 remaining co-defendants testify, that is absolutely devastating to those remaining defendants. So I predict there could be one more pleading guilty, and then the last person, heaven forbid what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, it's going to be like a fire drill, just people rushing to try to take a plea because, as you said, you don't want to be the last one that cooperates because that's going to be a tough hill to climb. Terry, Angela didn't pull a trigger, but she was a big part of the planning these horrific murders. Does 30 years in exchange for testifying against her family sound right to you?
It actually does, Brian. Nothing, no matter how long she's in jail, will bring back these 8 men, women, and children. But her pleading guilty and testifying against her husband, Billy, and her son, George, is going to help the prosecution. They're going to spend less time, less money on those cases. And she's 50 years old. So by the time she gets out, which she won't, she'll be 80 years old. She doesn't have a chance of parole. So I think that it is reasonable. We know that, her son, Jake, did plead guilty. He's got 8 consecutive life sentences. So I think it's appropriate. I absolutely do.
Absolutely. Now, Anjanette, with Jake and Angela agreeing to testify against George and Billy Wagner, what's the status of their cases?
Well, George Wagner was in court on Monday, and the proceeding actually didn't really go forward. There was no substance to that proceeding because there wasn't a court reporter there. However, his attorneys just last Friday, when that hearing happened for Angelea Wagner, were given the confessions, the statements of both Jake and Angelea Wagner. So they haven't even had a chance to review those items. And I spoke by email with Billy Wagner's attorneys. He's due in court later this week. They still have not received the statements of Jake and Angelea Wagner. So they are just kind of in pretrial mode, just waiting to get that information and review it with their clients.
Yeah, I think once they get that information review with the clients, we might see a little bit more of what Gene Rossi was suggesting down the line. Thank you all. And to more legal news in the state of Ohio, where a man is accused of setting 3 fires in his neighborhood. Stanley Ford is on trial for the murders of 9 people, including an entire family, by setting 2 houses on fire in his Ohio neighborhood. He's also accused of setting fire to a parked car where nobody was harmed. If convicted, Ford could face the death penalty. Monday marked day 8 of the arson trial, where a forensic fire supervisor took the stand to talk about what he found on surveillance footage the night that one of the fires was set. We will continue to follow the case and bring you the latest on Law&Crime Daily. A judge sentenced an Ohio mother to 21 years to life in prison for the murder of her son. Brittany Gosney admitted to the murder of her 6-year-old son, James Hutchinson, earlier this year. Gosney admitted to trying to leave James and his siblings at a park, and when she tried to leave, she hit James with her vehicle as he tried to grab the door handle. Gosney said she and her boyfriend, James Hamilton, threw the boy's body in the Ohio River. His body has never been found. Hamilton will be sentenced next month. LA Dodgers pitcher Trevor Bauer will not return for the end of the season as an investigation continues into allegations he sexually assaulted a woman. Bauer has been on administrative leave for months. Last month, a judge denied the accuser's request for a permanent restraining order against Bauer. The woman claimed Bauer left her with serious injuries after rough sex. But Bauer produced text messages that showed the accuser said, "Give me all the pain." LA's district attorney is reviewing the case to determine whether criminal charges will be filed. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, the defense is ramping up their closing arguments as the trial against Robert Durst continues to unfold. Well, the defense says the state must prove to receive a guilty verdict. But first, updates on the federal trial against R&B singer R. Kelly. We hear from R. Kelly's former New York attorney what he says it will take for the jury to clear the singer.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. Now to a case we've been following for weeks. R. Kelly's sex trafficking trial is back in session. Kelly was charged in July 2019 after years of claims that he sexually abused women by way of his celebrity status. Kelly's accusers say he used his staff to recruit women and underage girls to participate in illegal sexual activity, forcing them to follow a series of rules, including asking for permission to eat or use the bathroom. Officials say the R&B singer violated the Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Law, otherwise known as the RICO Act. Kelly's accused of sexual exploitation of minors and transporting people across state lines for prostitution. For more information about Kelly's defense, we turn to attorney Steve Greenberg, who previously represented Kelly on the Brooklyn federal case and still represents the singer in his Illinois litigation. I sat down with Greenberg for a one-on-one interview where he reveals what he believes it will take for the defense to win the case. So let me just be clear. You're kind of taking a scalpel to this case, and you're saying, sure, he may have spread herpes to the 3 or 4 accusers who have been on the stand so far. Sure, some of these women may have been underage, even though they lied about their age at the time, but you're going specifically to where's the enterprise? That's your argument here, that you think it's going to win the day.
Right. Well, I think the only way to win this case is to attack the enterprise. There have been a lot of attacks on the women, and are they credible or are they not credible? Why were they doing it? They wanted to be his girlfriends. Now, when everything comes out, they're claiming they were abused. There's been a lot of, when you left, you didn't complain to anyone, you didn't tell anyone, you didn't call the police. And all of that is well and good, because you don't want the jurors to feel sorry for these women. If the jurors feel sorry for the women, then they're more likely to give the government a break on what's really the meat of the case, which is the RICO offense.
Any level of concern as to the case so far for R. Kelly, or do you think so far in a pretty good place, this is where I anticipated where we would be at this time?
I think the case has been going well for R. Kelly. I haven't been reading the transcript, so I can't tell everything. It's interesting. You get such competing views when you look on the internet from people that are R. Kelly supporters who think that they're just killing it, and some of the, for lack of a better term, mainstream media. When you read those accounts, you think that the case is problematic for him, although in both accounts, there's still these weaknesses in the RICO case. I don't agree with the approach of some of the attorneys. I think that some of the attorneys in the case smartly have now been made to sit down because they have no idea what they're doing.
Do you think that these 12 people that have been selected so far are going to carry the day for R. Kelly, or do you think they're going to lean more towards the prosecution?
Well, and here's the problem for R. Kelly. In a RICO case, in order to prove the RICO, they only need 2 substantive acts to be proven. So the jurors only have to agree that 2 of the many, many things, I think there's 18 separate acts, occurred. They could discount everything but, for instance, the couple of Mann Act violations, which are really the easiest ones for the government to prove. And that's why you have to attack the enterprise, because then you need all 12 people. I think all 12 people are going to agree that there's a couple of predicate acts, but then you need them to agree on the existence of the enterprise. But I don't think that you're going to be able to get 12 people to agree that there was in fact an enterprise here.
Let's bring back former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and Terry Austin. Terry, a former employee on the stand from Friday said that R. Kelly asked her why she let the woman escape. Could that spell out RICO against Kelly?
Absolutely. And the operable word here, Brian, is escape. There are over a dozen underlying acts for the RICO charge, and one of them is kidnapping and forced labor. And if Kelly himself used that word escape, it means he knows he's holding people against their will. He's forcing them to do labor against their will. So her testimony was absolutely critical here.
Gene, I get the technical argument that Steve Greenberg is making here, but it begs the question, what's the difference between an enterprise for sex trafficking and people working for someone who happens to be a sexual predator?
Well, one is conspiracy. I can conspire with somebody, say we had a lemonade stand, and instead of lemonade, we sold moonshine. And we're just using a chair in front of a house, and 2 or 3 of us are selling moonshine. That's a conspiracy. What Mr. Greenberg rightly says is enterprise is much different. It has an infrastructure. It can be formal or informal. And what he's saying is there's no infrastructure by which these crimes were committed. That's a tough road to hoe, given the predicate acts that have been alleged.
All right, well, Gene, you let me know where this lemonade stand is. We're definitely going to check it out later. Thank you for that. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, after 4 months of back and forth, closing arguments are underway in the trial against Robert Durst. We'll hear from the real estate heir's defense firsthand. Plus, big news out of Wisconsin in connection to the Slender Man stabbings, where a defendant is headed after 5 years in a state mental health institution. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily, covering cases from coast to coast. We begin in Wisconsin, where a defendant in the so-called Slender Man stabbing is set to be released from a mental health institution. 19-year-old Anissa Weir and Morgan Geiser were convicted back in 2014 of stabbing their middle school classmates 19 times. All this, they said, was in the name of Slender Man, a fictional character that appeared in fan fiction and video games. The girls lured then 14-year-old Peyton Lightner into the woods, stabbed her, and left her for dead. Lightner survived the near-deadly attack. In 2017, Weir was found not guilty by mental disease or defect and sentenced to 25 years to life. In July of this year, it was announced she would be released under the stipulation that she be tracked by health services caseworkers until age 37. Authorities say Weir plans to live with her father upon her release. In California, newly unsealed FBI documents show the late Kobe Bryant received an unsolicited murder-for-hire offer. In connection with a rape accuser back in 2003, the NBA star was accused of rape by a woman out of Colorado. New documents show then 31-year-old Patrick Garber, a Swiss bodybuilder living in California, reached out to Bryant, offering to kill the accuser in exchange for $3 million. According to the documents, Bryant contacted the FBI right away. Agents then arranged a meeting with the grabber for more information. He was arrested in September 2003 when he believed he would receive the first $1 million payment. Bryant maintained that the relations with his accusers were consensual, but was charged with felony sexual assault. The charges were later dropped when the accuser refused to testify. In international news, Prince Andrew of Great Britain is served with a federal lawsuit set to go before a New York judge on Monday. Virginia Giuffre says the Duke of York sexually assaulted her 3 times when she was just 17 years old. Giuffre, one of the outspoken victims of the late Jeffrey Epstein, says he and associate Ghislaine Maxwell coerced her to have sexual relations with the prince. She also says 2 of the incidents happened at Epstein's property. Giuffre filed a lawsuit against Prince Andrew in the same jurisdiction as a previous lawsuit against Maxwell. That trial is scheduled for later this year. For his part, the prince has repeatedly denied the allegations. When we come back, the state of California versus Robert Durst. After months in session, closing arguments are finally upon us. We bring you into the courtroom to hear from the real estate heir's defense. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Defense closing arguments continue in California for the trial of Robert Durst. Durst is charged with the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman. Prosecutors say Durst killed Berman because she knew information about his wife, Kathy's disappearance. Durst has been suspected in her disappearance, but her body has never been found. The 4-month trial started nearly a year and a half ago, halted by the pandemic and Durst's failing health. Closing arguments started last Wednesday after nearly 3 weeks of testimony from Durst himself. Day 2 of the defense closing argument began with David Chesnoff reminding the jury of what he thinks to be the lack of evidence shown by the prosecution.
Showing the guns from Texas doesn't prove Bob had a gun in California. There's no evidence at all presented in this 5-month trial that Bob possessed a weapon that murdered Susan Berman in California. They showed you lots of guns, none tied to Susan Berman's murder. They showed you 5 guns, I think. Why'd they do that? Same reason they showed you the dismembered body parts. Oh my God, there's guns. You guys are way more sophisticated than that. You're way more responsible than that. You're way more intelligent than that.
The defense then went on to remind the jury everything that the state has to prove, including that Durst murdered his wife, Kathy, and that Berman was a witness to that crime.
Here, the prosecution didn't even prove the alleged crime that Susan was supposed to be a witness to. They don't even have their theory straight. Did Kathy fall down the steps? Or did Bob kill her? I mean, which one is it? Nothing. We're talking about murder here. They want you to convict somebody for murder without telling you about the murder that the other person's supposed to be a witness to and proving there was a murder. It can't happen. It can't happen. So Susan wasn't a witness to anything. Susan was simply a friend who cared for Bob and eventually helped him as a spokesperson.
Gene, the defense argued that Kathy used cocaine and had trouble in med school. Where's the defense trying to go with these accusations?
They're trying to defile the victim. I don't think it's a good strategy. I think the defense should just stick to the lack of evidence. Westchester County did not charge Mr. Durst with any murder, or New York didn't charge him with any murder. And now in LA, they're going to prove there's a murder. I think it's a very bad strategy. At the end of the day, they have to focus on the evidence that ties Susan Berman's murder to Robert Durst. Forget Kathy Durst. Don't defile her. Don't ruin her name.
Agreed.
I think it's a bad strategy.
Agreed. Terry, both defense attorneys talked about a lack of evidence. Could this argument resonate with the jury?
Actually, I don't think at the end of the day it will resonate with the jury. I agree with Chesnoff. The jury is sophisticated, but they're sophisticated enough to know you don't have to have direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence is good enough, and there's plenty here, not to mention the cadaver note and the fact that Durst was in L.A. when Susan Berman was killed. So I think they have proven the case against Durst.
All right, we'll see how it plays out. Just a few more to go in this case. Thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.